Welcome everybody to another Village Torah portion discussion with, I'm here today, Rabbi Drew. We also have along with us in the audience, we have Emily, our summer rabbinic fellow, and of course Debbie, longtime participant in this series. So this week we have the Torah portion of Korah. There is a lot to discuss about Korah, and we could probably, I don't know about you, Emily, we could probably discuss. This could be like an entire, like several month sort of conversation of like a series of conversations, discussions. It's so fascinating, so much to unpack. Where do you even begin? Well, I'm actually going to begin towards the beginning of the Torah portion, as it turns out. There's something of interest to me, and actually, we're going to start off with the first handful of verses in this week's Torah portion. But there is something that I'm going to pinpoint, and then we'll get into what's going on. We've got the first 7 verses, which sort of sets out what we've got going on in this week's Torah portion, a little bit of a context, if you will, of what's going on.
Now Korah, son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, betook himself along with Dathan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and son of Peleth, descendants of Reuben, to rise up against Moses, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, chosen in the assembly, men of repute. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and the Lord is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above the Lord's congregation?" When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Then he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, "Come morning, the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy, and will grant him access to himself. He will grant access to the one he has chosen. Do this, you, Korah, and all your bands, take fire pans, and tomorrow put fire in them and lay incense on them before the Lord. Then the man whom the Lord chooses, he shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi."
Thank you so much, Emily. So there's a lot here. We could I'm not going to go in these different directions. We could look at even just verse 3, the complaint. You've gone too far. The entire community is Chol Ha'eda Kulam Kadoshim. Everybody's holy. Why are you raising yourself up above everybody else, the rest of the congregation of the Lord? What's going on here?
That's what my newsletter, Dvar Torah, is about.
Oh, yeah? Okay, so people stay tuned for Emily's Dvar Torah. So you can go in that direction if you want. You can definitely check that out. Totally subtle plug for that. Okay, so it's in the check out the Dvar Torah in the Shabbat newsletter by Emily. I'm really fascinated, at least for our purposes in this conversation, about Moses's response. How does Moses respond? Now, we have really, actually quite tersely in the 4th verse here, Moses heard this and fell upon his face. It's really terse. 5 words, really quick, really short, and yet it just drips and just feels just chock full of emotional impact that he himself, Moses, is just struck by this. It's a really biting criticism in verse 3, and he doesn't even know how to respond. Right? So he hears it and he falls on his face. So I'm going to raise a big question mark about that, and we're going to go into it a little bit. And then this is actually further fascinating. He says once he falls on his face, he then figures out a response. He says, "Come morning, the Lord will make known who is his and who is holy, and who will grant and will grant him access to himself." So I'm very curious about that as well. So I'm going to pause here and just introduce what we're going to go into. I'm curious a little bit about some of the commentary, some of at least the sort of classical, medieval, traditional commentaries on these. And then we're going to go a little bit into Midrash about this that I found fascinating. Now, yes, I'll go a little bit into how I came upon that and its relationship to Cedar Village. So going back into it, we have Rashi. I've mentioned Rashi in this space before. Stands for, it's an acronym. Rashi is an acronym. He didn't walk around and just call himself Rashi. His name is Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. He was a Franco-German commentator par excellence. And he, as far as the falling on the face, Actually, I'll tell you what it reminds me of. Before we even get into any of the commentators, I'll just tell you, me as a reader, when I hear it, when I read it, when I come across this just sudden falling upon one's face, it strikes me, it reminds me of the 10th chapter in Leviticus when Aaron's sons pass away and Moses speaks to him and Aaron is just simply silent. And there's this very quiet, emotional, and yet heavy impact going on here that Moses doesn't even know how to respond. It's in fact, he doesn't respond, right? First of all, he responds physically instead of verbally. And then secondarily, the answer he provides, the way he responds to them, he doesn't even directly respond to their criticism. In fact, he just simply says, well, I want to say meet me at the OK Corral at noon, but what he says is come another time. We'll figure this out. I'm not even going to directly respond to you. I'm not even going to try to rationalize or otherwise develop a logical response to you. This is what we're going to do. In the morning, we're going to figure this out. So I just, for me, it also coming upon the heels of what we've seen so far in the book of Numbers, he's getting really frustrated with the Jewish people right now. Like he got really frustrated with the whole piece about the food issue. Everybody was complaining about the food and he got super sick of it. And he told God, just kill me. I can't deal with him. The Bnei Israel, the Israelites are just too much. Just kill me now, God. And God says, no, I can take care of it. I have you. And here too, at least he doesn't go all the way to say, God, just kill me. But he is able to figure something out. Now, Rashi says that he fell on his face because of the rebellion. This is already the fourth offense on the part of the Israelites, whether it was the golden calf. We also have the sort of the tourists in last week's Torah portion, golden calf. Oh, there are also the complainers, and then of course in the spies. So, but now his hands sank down, and then Rashi here offers us a parable. This may be compared to the case of a prince who sinned against his father, and for whom his father's friend gained forgiveness once, twice, and even three times. When he offended for the fourth time, the friend felt himself powerless, for he said, how long can I trouble the king? Perhaps he will not gain not again accept advocacy from me. Okay, this is nice. Basically, this is a lot. This is a lot to deal with. And so that's Rashi's way of dealing with it, but he's not the only one. And I want to offer just a few other, I don't know, perspectives from medieval commentators. We have one, Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra. He says he decided to do this, Birtsono, willingly. And then there are others who say that they, like prophets, when they receive a prophecy. Now, what's fascinating about this to suggest that it was like Moses was trying to receive a prophecy, trying to figure out from God, because he didn't know how to respond. And in thinking about the response he does offer to this group of folks who are trying to, Korah and his band, that how did Moses know to come up with this solution of people bringing their fire pans, that they should test it out in front of God? Maybe it could have been through prophecy. Unclear, but that's, as Ibn Ezra here mentions, that is a way of perhaps perceiving what Moses did. Rashbam, who is a grandson, Rabbi Shmuel, son of Meir, a grandson of Rashi, he says in prayer, the reason he fell on his face was simply to pray and to try to figure out either try to figure out what and then it was spoken to him what he would say to Korah, that he prayed to God and apparently received an answer. That meaning the answer, Moses, at least according to Rashbam here, to Rashi's grandson, it wasn't something he came up with entirely on his own. It was something that he received via God through prophecy. And then we have Chizkuni, who is an Italian commentator, and he says he was ashamed. Now, this is a very different approach, that Moses here was ashamed and he put his face on the ground in order to offer a prayer. So that at least is similar to what we saw from Rashbam, the prayer aspect. He hoped to receive a revelation from God how to confront this challenge. Now, this sort of notion of asking God, how do we deal with this situation, does to some degree, it reminds me of the issue with the people complaining about the food. The whole idea about complaining about the food, I mean, Moses, I already mentioned Moses said, just kill me, but God has an answer, and God figures out what needs to be done and And so Moses just sort of the conduit. Moses doesn't even really know how to respond to the food complaints. But here with the leadership complaints, it's unclear. It's actually deeply vague in the biblical text how much Moses figures this out unto himself. He figures just on his own. He comes up creatively with this idea of this showdown in the following morning with the fire pans, or as some of these medieval commentators try to offer us, saying maybe whether it was he was embarrassed or he bent down to pray, but either way, that he was able to receive through prophecy, even if it totally left unstated in the text, that God provided him the answer. This is the solution. This is what you're going to do. And here's the roadmap to figuring out and responding to their complaints. Okay. But either way, no matter which direction one wants to come up with, whether it was an original idea from Moses or whether it was, as some of these medieval commentators offer us, some sense of prophecy and answer from God and how to fix the leadership challenge going on from Korah and his band. But there's something that Moses is clearly deeply troubled by, but he's able to figure out an answer. Now, what's fascinating to me is the way he figures out the answer, or at least he says when. He doesn't say, let's do it right now, right here. We're just going to do it. We're going to have a, I don't know, an offering off, as it were, like a fire pan offering off right here in the streets. Instead, he says, tomorrow morning, let's do this bright and early. We're going to have this face off, a fire pan face off of offerings, as it were. He says, yeah, bring your fire pans. Everybody, bring your fire pans, put fire in them, lay incense on them before the Lord. Then the man whom the Lord chooses, that will be the Holy One. So we're going to have a fire pan, fire offering incense off, and we'll see who God chooses. I like that. It's nice that the decision is no longer in the hands of Moses and Aaron, whom Korah thinks and his band thinks are making the decisions to elevate themselves above them. But why the morning? Now, this is something that I never actually ever thought about. Why the morning? Well, they need time to prepare.
What is the fire pan?
It's a fire. I don't know. It's a pan where you have fire. It's not that heavy.
Okay.
And clearly they must have had them ready. And I think also the way he addresses them in the verse 7, that they're Levites, they're sons of Levi. So maybe not every Israelite had them, but at least the Levites did. So they had them. So it doesn't sound like it was an issue of procurement, or I don't think they were too heavy. They had access to them. So why wait until the morning?
Why wait until the morning?
Yeah.
To give the people time to think about what God may do.
I like that. Yeah.
I don't know. Does it have something to do with the morning sacrifice?
Oh, I like that. It's not the direction that what we're going to see going in, but I like that there's something to be said for the morning. Yeah, I like that.
I didn't realize they sacrificed in the morning.
Yeah, so they have in, let's see, this might not really be until Numbers 28, the chapter 28 in Numbers, but yeah, they offered morning and evening sacrifices. But as far as this specific Torah, the sort of incense fire offering, I will admit to you that I'm not an expert in sacrificial practices. That's not, who knows? I still have time. I can learn. I can develop that expertise.
Well, I think it gives the people time to think about what they have done and think about what God will do.
Yes. Okay. So I like where your head's at, Debbie. That's really great. So we have, okay. So last year with this Torah portion, it was literally last June. It was late June, but it was still June last year. And while with a resident, actually right here in, I think it was Redbud, right here at Cedar Village, we were doing some Torah portion. We were doing some Parsha studies of the Torah portion in Rashi. And so we were looking at this, and I don't know that I would have necessarily caught this or necessarily even spent much time on it, but we came across a comment of Rashi's. And Rashi, as I mentioned, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, medieval commentator par excellence. So
Yes.
he comments here, this time, meaning the time that Moses is speaking at this moment, now is a time of drunkenness. This is a time of drunkenness
Oh,
for us, and it is improper to appear before God. So there's so much to unpack right and just within that. And then Rashi continues, and Moses' intent, Debbie, was to push them off, that maybe they'll rethink what they've done. So
good.
it does.
Okay.
Rashi here does capture what you mentioned, that, you know what, maybe you need to sleep on it. Maybe you just need to think about it.
Oh,
Now, and that works either way, whether they are actually drunk or not. It doesn't matter. It's equally operable that maybe they were just first of all, just people need to sleep on it. But what's really fascinating is about Rashi's comment is how did it's thinking about the sort of the background and the context of, they didn't just all happen to meet up and all just decide, yeah, why are Moses and Aaron just elevating themselves above all of us? It sounds like they got together. They got together as a group, and when people get together as a group, sometimes they can get riled up, and when people are riled up and in a group, all sorts of things that could happen that would not necessarily have happened if this group think would have occurred. And especially when people are upset about leadership, when people get whipped up in a frenzy against the leadership, all sorts of things can happen.
yes.
I'm not saying anything about anything in our country, about any insurrections or anything of that sort. I'm just saying it can happen. It's been known to happen in human history. It may still happen. I don't know. But that's certainly something interesting that Rashi is pointing out here. Now, and that has nothing to do, by the way, even just this last line has just like, think about it, sleep on it, give some time, maybe have some time to yourselves and not just be whipped up in the state of a frenzy. But once we throw in this other element that Rashi mentions, it's a time of drunkenness. And there's two totally different aspects here. One is it's a time of drunkenness, and for us, and a totally separate thing also, it is an inappropriate time. It's inappropriate to appear before him. So it's interesting because I'm really fascinated by the first aspect, that it's a time of drunkenness, because it's one thing to have a group of hundreds of people, right? We're talking about 250 people. So 250 people have gathered. They are whipped up in a frenzy. They are upset about the leadership. Could alcohol have fueled that rebellion? It's not impossible, and Rashi seems to point out that it's actually quite possible that, who knows, maybe alcohol could have fueled this rebellion, which is really fascinating, that a whole bunch of people got together, got drunk, and decided that they weren't happy with the way the leadership was going. Has that ever happened in human history?
Yes.
Of course.
I think we can definitely say yes. People have gotten so these comments of Rashi are absolutely not far-fetched. But what's an interesting twist that Rashi does throw in here is that it's saying v'lo nachon leherot lefanav. It's inappropriate to appear before God, meaning the fire pan standoff that Moses offers here. He says, look, if we're going to do this, you guys can't be drunk when we do this, because we already had from Leviticus chapter 10 this directive of not to do any sort of service or offering for God when having consumed anything alcoholic. So
Right.
having wine or beer, you're not allowed to go offer. So it's inappropriate. We should do this now. Let's wait. You sleep this off. You'll be sober in the morning, and we can have our, showdown at the OK Corral, except it's sort of the God's Mishkan, as it were, the tabernacle. We're going to have the showdown at God's tabernacle. So that's a really interesting way for Rashi. Okay. Last June, I was very curious. Where did Rashi get this from? So he actually got it from this Midrash in Tanhuma. Now, I've mentioned Midrash in this space before. Midrash is rabbinic narrative expansion. So this rabbinic narrative expansion seeks to find sort of little hooks, little threads, and says, there's something more going on here. What is it? And so this picks up on this, what's going on in the morning. Why the morning? And this is Rashi's source material for this. So Rashi basically condensed this. So this is the underlying source material, which I found quite fascinating. Okay, so here we go. Actually, Emily, can I volunteer again? Thank you.
What reason did he have for saying, "In the morning he will make known"? Moses said, because perhaps they said this thing because they had been excessively eating and drinking. He therefore said, "In the morning." Perhaps between now and then they will repent. He said to them, "I have no authority to enter the Mishkan now. Even though there is no eating or drinking, it is simply because of us as that we are forbidden to enter, as we have taken food and drink."
Thank you, Emily. So this is actually, it almost seems like Rashi did a really fascinating distillation. So Rashi distilled this of saying it was a time of eating and drinking, not just drinking, but eating also, meaning they had almost like feasted. They got together, a whole bunch of people, 250 people gathered. How many people had started at the outset of this meal? But they had all been eating, they had all been drinking, they got together, and now he's saying, look, and not just simply eating and drinking.
Yes.
Not right. So not just simply eating and drinking, but also having excessively done so. Mitoch rov ma'achal mishta. So they actually said, or actually it's really fascinating. The way that this midrash positions Moses is saying, maybe, which almost like it seems to be that Moses is giving them the benefit of the doubt. They wouldn't have done this had they just been walking along on on an afternoon, but it was, maybe they just had rov ma'achal mishta. They had an abundant amount of food and drink, and that they said this. And so that's why he says morning, sleep it off. Okay, so that at least is similar, but it's not simply just because of shichrut. In fact, nowhere in this midrash does it say drunkenness. There's nothing pointing to being drunk. That's only in Rashi's commentary that he distills that. But here it's talking about just eating and drinking. They could have been dinner time, and they had a huge thing. People were kind of upset, but and then he says, but what is similar is that maybe they will do teshuvah, maybe they will repent, maybe they'll sleep it off, think again, and change their minds. And what's even further fascinating is he says to them, I don't have permission right now to enter. I'm not sure why Moses would lack the permission at that point in time, but the morning he would. And Moses, it doesn't seem as if he's taken part in any of this drinking or eating for that matter. So that's actually an interesting, when we contrast or compare to Rashi, it really does something quite different. It doesn't, it's not, he just says, I don't have the permission, versus in Rashi's distillation, he says, look, it's not appropriate for us to appear because we're drunk. Well, here in the original Midrash, no one's necessarily drunk, and certainly not Moses. And yet he just simply says, the driving force is, you know what? They need to sleep on it. They need to rethink this. But Rashi seems to point more towards the drunkenness aspect and the inappropriateness for appearing. So it doesn't make Rashi wrong. It just means, even though Rashi had this underlying midrash, he was able then to distill it and focus it more about the problematic aspect of drinking and drunkenness. So, but either way, Debbie, I like your approach of saying that they need to sleep it off. Maybe you'll rethink it once you get a good night's sleep. So, yeah, it definitely, for me, I don't know about any of you. I mean, through that learning last year with that particular resident, for me, it was fascinating to think about that one word, boker. Why wait until the morning? The fire pans are not hard to access. It's just a matter of maybe you need to sleep it off. Who knows? Maybe alcohol was involved, or maybe not. Right? Or
Yeah,
maybe
that was not the direction I would have gone in. So that's very interesting.
same. I never thought about it. And also maybe just like the people got whipped up in a frenzy getting all together. So there's lots of different things, but yeah, ultimately sleeping it off is Moses' response. And whether he got that from just thinking about it for a moment, or he got it through some sense of prophecy from God.
So how did you dissolve the fact that it was in the morning?
So basically the morning aspect is Moses says, look, maybe you guys
Need to go or not?
basically, basically, as you pointed out, Debbie, it gives them an opportunity to rethink it, to sleep on it, to change their minds, to come to a greater sensibility. And maybe some of that was just being driven by them being whipped up into a frenzy, getting all together and getting excited. And who knows, maybe drunkenness could have also have been a catalyst for that, the desire for insurrection and a change in leadership.
It's true.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for answering the question.
My pleasure, Debbie. My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to you too.
All right.